You may be wasting a lot of time if you are still using old Excel formulas like sum, average, max, min, count A, vlookup, hlookup, index, match, and xlookup. And even, yes, xlookup is already starting to become outdated. And I'm going to show you why. Because aggregate and filter are two functions that can replace all the others I just mentioned and a whole lot more. So based on that list, we are talking about almost 30 formulas, filter and aggregate. Those are the two functions you really need from now on. So let's jump in and start with a practical example. Starting here on the first tab, call it simple, I'm going to show you a practice why aggregate is so much better than sum, average, max, mean, count A, and the rest. What do we normally do with those formulas like sum, average, and max? We can add things, calculate average, find the highest value, count how many entries we have, and so on. However, I'm going to show you in a simple and practical way how to use aggregate in a way that will actually help you in your day-to-day work. I have a project spreadsheet here, but honestly, it doesn't matter whether you work with purchasing, sales, logistics, HR, maintenance, or anything else, because the logic is exactly the same. Here I have this project table with multiple columns and multiple rows. I want to know the total approved budget. Easy enough, I could just sum the entire column. Great, so let's do that in two ways. First, using sum, and then comparing it with aggregate. That way you see in practice why aggregate is much better. I'm going to place the total up here in the header area just to keep things organized. So I'll click rows first, second, and third here on the left, right click, and then choose insert just to create a little space. Now let's do it. I want to total everything in the approved budget column. So I can type equals sum, double click it, and then select everything inside the approved budget column, all the way down to the last row of the spreadsheet. Hit enter and done. There it is, 70 million in the total. But look how limited the sum formula really is. I'm going to click inside the table, maybe in the first cell, then we can go to the home tab and turn on filter. Done. Now, let's say I want to filter the projects and look only at the commercial area. I click the filter, keep only commercial, and click OK. Now the table is filtered and shows me only the commercial projects. So, does that mean I have 70 million only in commercial? No, of course not. That's wrong. The 70 million refers to the entire spreadsheet, not just the commercial rows. So, the sum does not update automatically when we filter the table. And that's the first reason why aggregate is better than sum. So let me clear the filter here. Done. And now right above the table, I'm going to use a sum formula inside aggregate. Equal sign, aggregate. And maybe you are thinking, but I don't see aggregate in my Excel. That may be because you are using an older version of Excel. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't learn it. Learn it anyway, because maybe tomorrow, next week, or next month, your company updates Excel and aggregate is suddenly available. So it's worth learning the newer Excel functions now. So I type aggregate and double click it. The first thing Excel asks for is the function number. And here I can choose from a lot of options: average, count, max, min, and so on, so on. In my case here, I want sum, which is function number 9. So I double click 9, then type comma. Next comes the option argument. One of the great things about aggregate is that I can also ignore errors. So if your spreadsheet has an error somewhere, like a reference or anything else, sum will break and return an error. However, aggregate can ignore the errors. So it can also ignore read and rows and do several other useful things. The option I usually like to use is the last one: ignore read and rows and error values. So I double click the option, type comma, and then for the array argument, I select all the values I want to sum. Then I simply press enter. Now you might say, but nothing changed. The result is the same. Yes, because both formulas are adding the same numbers. But here's the difference. When I filter the area column again and choose only commercial, then click OK, look what happens. One total shows 4 million and the other still shows 17 million. The 4 million is the total only for what I actually filtered. So that's a point for aggregate. It updates automatically as you filter the table. Sum stays static and keeps using the entire table, even when you are not looking at the whole table. Now I'll filter the category column and keep only growth. Click OK, and there it is. Aggregate updates again. So that's what's so interesting here. We now have a dynamic total that changes as the table changes. If you filter the table, the total also filters and shows only what's visible. Another point for aggregate. And maybe you're wondering, what about those other formulas I mentioned? Average, max, mean, count A. It's exactly the same idea. Inside aggregate, you can calculate an average, a sum, a maximum to find the highest value, a minimum to find the lowest one, or count how many values you have. For example, let's talk about counting values. Here I have the end date column. I have an end date for each product, but some projects are blank because they still don't have an end date. So let's say I want to count only the projects that already have a date building. What could I do? I could type equals count A, double click it, and then select the entire end date column down to the bottom. Then I hit enter. Excel returns 30 because there are 30 filled dates. But what if I now want to filter the data and see only one execution model? I click execution model, choose agile, and press OK. And look over there, count A is still showing 30. But that doesn't seem right because I can only see a few dates. So how could that be possible? 30. Once again, it's because we are using an older Excel function, count A. It doesn't update dynamically. So let me clear that filter. Now, instead of using count A, I want to use equals aggregate. Double click it. The function numbers tells Excel what I want to do. In this case, I want to count values, which is function number 3. I double click 3, type a comma, then choose the option to ignore hidden rows and error values. Double click that, type comma, and finally select all the values in the end date column. Then I can hit enter. At the first, it looks like the same result, but here's the difference. When I go to the filter table, and again, I want to see, let's say, only agile execution model. Aggregate updates automatically, while the older count A formula stays fixed and does not update. So once again, aggregate wins. Let me clear the filter and we can move on. Now let's talk about lookup functions, because at this point it may sound a little extreme. I said that vlookup, hlookup, index, match, and even xlookup are already getting old. But how can that be possible, right? Because xlookup is one of the newer Excel functions. Well, filter is so powerful that it can even replace those functions too. Let me show you here a really interesting example. Here I have a sales table, but it could be any other table too, okay? What do lookup functions do? They take one piece of information and search for a matching reference somewhere else. For example, I have webcam HD here in the sales table. Then over on the right, I have an inventory table. If I look at webcam HD in the inventory table, I can see things like stock location, unit cost, and so on. For example, I can see that webcam HD in location A costs 150, but in location B, it costs 155. So I can match those pieces of information together, and that's exactly what lookup functions are supposed to do. VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, index, match, and XLOOKUP can help with that. But there's the problem. I don't just need to look up webcam HD. I need to look up webcam HD in the location B. In other words, webcam HD appears more than once in the inventory list because it exists in two locations, A and B. I want the B one, so I cannot return 150. I need to return 155. That means two things have to be considered at the same time, the product and the stock location. It's not just the product. Doing that with vlookup, xlookup, index, and match, of course, yes, it's possible, but it's not simple. You usually have to add a helper column, combine values, and do extra work. But with filter, it becomes much easier. Filter can solve this in a much cleaner way. So based on the product and the stock location, I want to return the unit cost. Like I said, each product can exist in multiple locations and the price change depends on the location. So in the unit cost column, instead of trying to force the lookup formula, I'm just going to solve everything with filter. I type equals filter and double click it. The first argument is the array. The array is what I want returned as the result. In this case, I want to return the unit cost column. So I select that, the entire column, unit cost column. It's very important to lock the reference because we are going to use the same formula across multiple rows. Every row will need this same formula to return the cost for each product. So I need to lock the reference so it doesn't move. To do that, I press F4 on the keyboard, okay? So F4 key. That adds the $signs and locks the range. Then I type comma. Now for the include argument, let's start simple. I want Excel to return the rows where the product column is equal to the product I have here on the left. So I select the product column, lock it with F4 key, and compare it to the product cell in this row. Then I press enter. Look at that. Since webcam has two prices, the formula returns both 150 and 155. That means filter successfully returned both prices for webcam HD. But in this case, I want only the price for location B. So what I'm going to do, since we already told filter to match the product, we now need to add another condition for stock location. That way filter can identify the exact price I need. And if you have even more criteria, you can keep adding them in the same way I'm about to show you. So here's what I will do. I click the formula again, double click and edit. The include part I already created, the part where the product equals the selected product. I'm going to wrap the whole condition in parentheses. So I open parentheses and then close parentheses. Then I can type an asterisk, which works like an AND logic here. Then I open another set of parentheses, open and close parentheses. And within those parentheses, I select the stock location column. We can lock the range with F4 key. Then I compare it to the stock location cell in this row. Now we can hit enter. And now filter returns exactly what I want, 155. 55, okay? And if I change location B to location A and press enter, it changes to 150. So now we've created a lookup that vlookup, hlookup, index and match function, and also xlookup will not handle this cleaned by default. And yes, they can do that. However, not like, just like I said, you usually need a helper column and extra setup. Filter solves it all in one simple formula. Now I can click and drag the formula down and the problem is solved. I can return the correct value for each product using two criteria, product and stock location. And if you have even more criteria, lookup formulas get more complicated, but filter stays easy. You just keep adding more conditions with an asterisk and other set of parentheses. So these two formulas, filter and aggregate, can really help you a lot in your daily Excel work. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this video, and if you have any comments or any suggestions to the next videos, let me know, comment down below, and I see you in the next one.